The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to China, this government is out of step with our allies. Last week, the U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions on 4 more officials involved in the draconian security laws in Hong Kong. That makes 15 in total. The number of officials sanctioned by the Canadian government? 0, Mr. Speaker. Why is this government always hanging back when it comes to getting serious with China?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has a complex, multidimensional relationship with China that looks at challenges and engages with China with eyes wide open. Many international partners are also facing similar challenges and are actively engaging with them in order to evaluate best approaches together. We've been clear about the principles and commitment to the rule of law, our deep concern for our citizens who have been detained, and our farmers and producers. We remain firm in defending our principles and interests, and always will.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to threats against Canadian citizens, our eyes have been wide open for years. Chinese Canadians have been subjected to intimidation, not just in Hong Kong, but here in Canada as well. At committee, immigration officials admitted they do not track, nor do they try to stop Chinese agents posing as students, as tourists, or workers. Why is the Prime Minister failing to protect Canadians that speak out against the Chinese Communist regime?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has among the best security agencies in the world, and the folks who work for our security agencies work every single day to keep Canadians safe. Not all of it appears in the newspapers. On the contrary, a lot of the work that is done in important situations is never heard of at all. But we will continue to ensure we're supporting our security agencies, supporting Canadians who speak up, and protecting all Canadians from foreign interference or influence, because we know that to be free in Canada is the best thing in the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, our security agencies know that Huawei cannot be in our 5G network, so I hope the Prime Minister votes with us on our motion. When Australia realized they had a problem with infiltration by Chinese agents, they did something about it. They stopped infiltration on campuses, in business, in academia. This Prime Minister waves his finger and says interference is inappropriate. Chinese agents threatening Canadians on our soil, and all this Prime Minister has to say is it's inappropriate. Will the Prime Minister show Canadians that he has a plan to keep them safe from Chinese operations in Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our security agencies have worked with a range of Canadian institutions and universities to make sure that they are safe. Canadian universities, of course, work with a range of industry partners on research projects. So we created a working group with universities and those national security agencies to help Canadians safeguard their work and identify potential risks. We will always protect data and intellectual property, advance science, and ensure that international research partnerships are always beneficial to Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Les États-Unis.
The United States, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand have all said no to Huawei as part of their 5G. They put the interests of their fellow citizens ahead of the Chinese state. But the Liberal government continues to admire China and is ignoring the safety and security of Canadians. When will the Prime Minister say no to Huawei in our 5G network? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. 5G technology can respond to an increase in users and provide higher capacity and faster service. We will ensure that Canadians benefit from the best 5G technology and will always be there to protect the security and interests of Canadians. That's why we're working with our security agencies that will make recommendations on the best way to ensure competitiveness and protection for Canadians and our companies. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal member for Saint-Laurent talks about the decline of French in Montreal as a myth. But the real myth, Mr. Speaker, is that the Liberal government claims to protect French in Quebec. Since 2015, we've been waiting for a modernization of the Official Languages Act. No action and lots of delays. Does the Prime Minister agree with his Member of Parliament? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The member for Saint-Laurent apologized for her insensitive remarks, and as a Montrealer, I am concerned about the decline we are seeing in French. The government will always be there to protect French across the country, be it in official language minority communities or in Quebec. We acknowledged in the throne speech that French has a specific status in North America, and we are going to work in Quebec and across the country to protect French. We are here to protect francophones across the country. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Prime Minister. Our rights stop where injury to others occur. Those are the words of the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Now, based on what the Minister of Canadian Heritage said, he's responsible for the CRTC, Radio-Canada, and Culture, that I would lose my right, that anyone would lose their rights, that we all lose our freedom of expression as soon as someone decides to state that they are injured or offended by what is being said. Can the Prime Minister confirm that? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. No, Mr. Speaker. We will always defend the freedom of expression and our creators and artists, their right to challenge our authorities, to challenge each other. We need our creators to make us laugh, to make us think about a better world, a different world. Our creators are the essence of our identity. We will always support them and defend their freedom of expression. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Look, talking about creators, who's in charge of censorship at Radio-Canada? Because of a comment, not a complaint, not a letter to the Ombudsman, a simple comment, an episode of La Petite Vie was censored by Radio-Canada, and it was replaced by a warning in the event that someone would have might have confused La Petite Vie with a BBC documentary. Can the Prime Minister tell us if Guylaine Tremblay, Marc Labrèche, or Claude Meunier criticizing a black, playing a black, needs to be censored at Radio-Canada? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we will always defend the right and freedom of expression, the ability to fully express oneself in this country. Decisions made by Radio-Canada are independent of of the government. We expect everyone to defend fundamental rights. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the Bloc voted against our motion to tax the ultra-rich and excessive profits being made by large corporations. Families are having trouble making ends meet, and the ultra-rich people have recorded record profits. Why does the Prime Minister always defend the ultra-rich? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, when we were elected in 2015, the first thing we did was to increase taxes on the rich and reduce them for the middle class. Unfortunately, the NDP voted against that initiative. Each step along the way, we were there to help the middle class, to help lift Canadians out of poverty, and during the pandemic, we are here to help Canadians, workers, and small business. We are going to ensure that we are always there to help Canadians to make it through this crisis, to create a better world, because they are prosperous. We will be there for Canadians each step along the way.
Well, let's talk about what happened yesterday. Yesterday, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the Bloc voted against our motion to tax the ultra-wealthy and to tax the excess profits of large corporations. Let's talk about what excess profits look like. Westons, who own large grocery stores across Canada, have received massive profits during this pandemic, and what they're doing is increasing dividend payouts to their shareholders while they are cutting the pay of frontline workers. So why does this Prime Minister stand with the Westons instead of frontline workers?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, the very first thing this government did in 2015 when we got elected was we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. And what did the NDP do, Mr. Speaker? They voted against it. Every step of the way, we have been there to support the middle class, to support people working hard to join it, and to make sure Canadians got ahead. Whether it was 1 million jobs created over the past 5 years, whether it was 1 million people lifted out of poverty, Mr. Speaker, at the same time, we will continue to fight for Canadians and for their success.
The honourable member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Monsieur le Président, le gouvernement...
Mr. Speaker, the government has finally acknowledged that its policy isn't working, and that's why it's going to be introducing a new policy framework for China. China has put in place subversive operations here in Canada. It's targeting Canadians and jeopardizing the rights and freedoms of Canadians. When will the government put forth a real plan to stop China's operations here in Canada? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. I thank my honourable colleague for his question. Mr. Speaker, on the motion put forth by the Conservative Party today, we were prepared to move amendments, constructive amendments, to advance the situation. In terms of foreign policy and national security, what we want is to work with opposition members with respect to the new framework we're putting forth. This is a normal development. Since 2020, China of 2020 is not the same as it was many years ago. We are developing plans to respond to this new reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Député de Wellington.
The honourable member for Wellington, Halton Hills. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the government will be voting in favour of our motion tomorrow.
The government said it would make a decision on Huawei before the election. Then in July it said it would make a decision on Huawei after the election. It's now been more than a year since the election and still no decision. The government also says that it believes in multilateralism, but 4 of the 5 eyes have already made a decision to restrict Huawei from their networks. Canada is unilaterally alone in not making a decision. When will the government join with our allies and make a decision on Huawei's participation in Canada's 5G network?
Join with us.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government is going to continue to ensure that Canadian networks are kept safe and secure, and we've been consistent on this point for many months now. While we won't comment on any specific companies, an examination of 5G technologies and a review of security and economic considerations is ongoing. We're going to weigh these matters with allies and partners, with our security experts, and we're going to make the best decision for Canadians, not on the basis of politics.
Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, the Public Safety Minister says he doesn't, quote, tolerate hostile foreign actors threatening Canadians, but China's Operation Fox Hunt continues without real action to charge and arrest state-sponsored bullies terrorizing Canadians. This morning, the Foreign Minister said the Public Safety Minister will bring forward measures to protect the safety and security of Canadians. So to the Minister, and for all those being harassed and bullied by China's communist regime, what exactly are those actions, and when will they be implemented?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and let me also be very clear that we know that the activities of hostile state actors are prevalent in this country. They use their intelligence and security services to threaten and intimidate individuals outside their country, and when individuals in Canada are subjected to harassment, manipulation, or intimidation by foreign states, these activities constitute a threat to Canada's sovereignty and to the safety of all Canadians. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure them that our security agencies and law enforcement agencies are actively taking steps to protect them, their personal information, and their interests, both domestic and foreign, from the threat of foreign interference and espionage.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Well, he recognizes this reality, but on China, these Liberals are clearly falling behind our allies, and they are failing to protect the safety and security of Canadians. In 1 year, Operation Fox Hunt coerced 680 people around the world with stark options: return to China or commit suicide. And families in China are threatened or arrested to force compliance. Canada's National Security Committee report said that part of this operation is even carried out here at home in our CMP offices. The U.S. has already made arrests. So how far does this go? How many Canadians will be harmed before this government, this minister, actually does something?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would reiterate that we are taking a whole-of-government approach, protecting the interests of Canadians and security of Canadians. Our security and intelligence community, including CSIS and the RCMP, are actively investigating threats of foreign interference and espionage, and where the evidence exists, we'll take action. But in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we've undertaken a significant outreach campaign to sensitize Canadians, Canadian companies, and other stakeholders involved in this activity or subject to this activity. Mr. Speaker, we will take the steps necessary to keep Canadian interests safe.
The
Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le Mr. Speaker, the Communist Party of China is working tirelessly to expand its sphere of influence economically, militarily, and diplomatically. The extent of its sphere of influence has never been clearer than recently, as we face a global pandemic originating in China. The World Health Organization is under Chinese influence. Designated scientists are struggling to investigate the origins of the virus in China. Why does the government have blind faith in a compromised organization? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's concerning to hear the member opposite talk about the World Health Organization under the influence of China. Listen, we know that the World Health Organization, like every organization, will have to conduct a review about how they've managed the global pandemic, but we also know that the institution plays a critical role in beating back not just COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, but diseases like Ebola, diseases like HIV/AIDS, diseases like the measles. Mr. Speaker, we need global action on disease. It's what protects us all. Thank you.
Honorable député de Chicoutimi-Le
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le Chinese forces are at work in Canada and they're threatening Canadian interests. By blindly relying on a compromised organization, the government has put the lives of Canadians at risk. It hasn't listened to Canadian experts. It cut funding to the Global Public Health Intelligence Network. It's questioned the asymptomatic transmission of COVID-19. Who is the government accountable to? Canadians or to the Chinese regime?
Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way we've relied on public health experts and officials, people that have epidemiological advice and virologists to guide our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we've worked with international partners. We've done the work that is needed to protect Canadians, and we're going to continue that work, Mr. Speaker. This is a global incident of public health crisis, and we have to rely on science as the way out. Mr. Speaker, it is concerning to hear the member opposite not understand that science is the way out of this crisis, and in fact, we will work strongly with all, Mr. Speaker, we'll work strongly with all partners to ensure that we support provinces and territories and Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Another title for the Prime Minister. Canada is investing more than $100 billion in a policy for naval construction. 2/3 are going to Irving and Halifax, and 1/3 to Seaspan in BC. Less than less than 3% to Davie in Quebec City, which is one of the largest and most reliable shipyards in the country, with 50% of the naval capacity in this country. Today, we've learned that by buying the Obelix and the Asterix from Davie, Canada would have saved between $2 and $3 billion for the resupply ships. Mr. Speaker, what's the Liberals' problem with Davie and to the Quebec City region? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. There are no problems, Mr. Speaker, between the government and Davie. We initiated negotiations to include the Davie shipyard as an authorized shipyard under the National Shipyard Construction Strategy. $2.1 billion has gone to Davie so far. Other contracts are under negotiation, and Davie is a very important partner for the Government of Canada, Mr. Speaker. We are proud to work with the Davie shipyard and with the workers of the Davie shipyard. The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, the government had the choice: award Davie $1.4 billion in contracts or award over $4 billion under the shipbuilding strategy. The difference is $2.6 billion. That's how much the government is willing to spend to avoid giving Davie a contract. The price of not doing business in Quebec. That's $150 that each Quebec taxpayer throws out the window to keep the best shipyard in North America idle. Those are Quebec taxpayer dollars. When will the government finally give Davy its fair share of contracts? 20%, not less than 3%. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, once again, I would point out that we are very happy to work with Davy and very happy with the asterisks and with the work it's doing. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer has stated we're comparing apples to oranges between the asterisks and the resupply ship. The resupply ships are underway in Vancouver, and there are other promising contracts available for Davy.
Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, days after Meng Wanzhou, executive of the Chinese giant Huawei, was arrested in 2018, 2 Canadians were arrested by the Chinese government in an act of retaliation. Yet this government is still toying with the idea to allow China to plant the seeds of digital control in our country and freely collect Canadians' data and personal information. Will the government commit today to ban 5G Huawei?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we're well aware that emerging fifth-generation technologies are a global phenomenon, and we're going to ensure that Canadians benefit from the latest and most beneficial 5G innovations. But we're going to do this in a way that accounts for all security, economic, and scientific considerations. We're going to listen to our experts, and we'll make a decision in due course. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this government has underestimated the scale and ambition of China and its Trojan horse opportunism for too long. China's counter-espionage law says that in any case the CCP deems relevant organizations and individuals must provide espionage evidence truthfully and may not refuse. Even if Huawei says it won't hand data to the Chinese government, it wouldn't have a choice. Does the minister recognize the security risk in allowing Huawei to operate 5G in Canada?
For public safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure the member opposite understands that I am not going to discuss ongoing security or criminal investigative activities undertaken by our very able security and law enforcement agencies. However, I want to assure him, and I would point to him, for example, to the work of the NCI COP committee that released a report earlier this year, making it very clear that China is a key and growing risk in this regard. And as has already been stated, the government is eyes wide open. We work very closely with all of our Five Eyes partners. We are well aware of all of the risks inherent to this, and we are prepared to take the action necessary at the appropriate time.
L'honorable député